Now, Ilana Berry, you
Yes.
wrote the book. Can you put that up again so everyone can see it? The Peacock and the Sparrow. All right.
Yes.
So this novel you have, this is everywhere right now. This is in
It's
Amazon. This is anywhere you
everywhere.
can buy books. I want to take a quote from someone very important in the world of creating espionage and type TV shows and stuff like that. Joseph Weisberg, who said the most realistic espionage story I've ever read, which is a pretty cool accolade for someone that created that whole show, that whole series, The Americans, and that was all kind of based in that kind of that type of genre. How'd you feel when you got that accolade? That's pretty cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, amazing.
Mm.
It's one of my favorite blurbs that I've gotten. Yeah, I mean, great because I really set out to write a really realistic espionage story,
Yeah.
as Dell knows. I think kind of spy novels fall into two categories. You have the really sexy, glamorous ones, and there are
Yeah.
plenty of those out there. With spies like scaling roofs and chasing cars, and then
Yeah.
there are the more gritty and realistic ones, and maybe quieter too. They don't
Mhm.
necessarily have the same theatrics, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I set out to write. So it was a huge compliment to me.
That's really cool. That's very
No,
cool.
that is no small thing because I think
Mhm.
with when you look at Weissman, what he has done in terms of because he's also a writer, but The Americans is phenomenal. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really one of the
Yeah.
most realistic, or no, realistic's not the word, authentic.
Mm.
Because the operational pace of those two individuals would crush anyone. It's always something crazy happening every week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when it speaks to that authenticity, that is so huge. And you start looking at the whole genre of espionage fiction, from Le Carre to Green to individuals like Jason Matthews and David McCluskey, and Alana is clearly in that forefront of
Mm.
just
Thank you.
authentically written, richly layered. It's tremendous. One of these days, I'm going to have you sign this.
For sure. I'd love to.
Yeah.
Thank you. And by the way, Joseph Weisberg, you guys probably know this, but he worked at the CIA as a case officer for a while. And so he has that sort of authenticity as well. And he also wrote a really wonderful book called An Ordinary Spy, which is also quieter, much more
Yeah.
realistic, say.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And he also, I think it was about a year ago, he published Russia Upside Down.
Yes. I haven't read it. Have you read it?
I've read parts of it because I am one of those individuals who is tragically reading too many things at the same time. So you come and go from it. But what I really found fascinating was it was just kind of like let's look at Russia differently.
Yeah.
Let's stop looking at them as the ubiquitous evil empire and realize that only represents a small portion of the population.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
it's very much worth the time to read.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's kind of like Iran that way. I feel like, there's some
Yeah.
countries where the regimes are clearly, opponents, but not the people, and I
Right.
think Iran is like that too.
Right. Yeah. A lot of places I feel like that have that kind of totalitarian or kind of what do you call it? That type of regime.
Yeah.
The people tend to be more or less the opposite, even in like China. I spent some time in Beijing for a minute, and the people themselves are very peaceful people, very loving people, very hurried people. And but the government itself, they have their issues, obviously, so that it's definitely a juxtaposition.
Yeah, for sure.
So one of the things that I had a question about is you're a former CIA. You've done some time there. When you were in this situation, because you were in Bahrain, you were in Iraq during the Arab Spring.
So I was in Baghdad for a year for the CIA, 2004, 2005. And then I was in Bahrain later after I left the CIA.
Okay.
Not while I was there. Yep.
Okay. So that's part of the subject in the book that you're writing about, is from that point of view. When you were in these situations, did you ever think like, wow, this is going to make a great book one day?
No, not necessarily. Not while I was in Baghdad. I was kind of just like, I hope I don't die from a border or anything.
Exactly.
So, no. But Bahrain, maybe a little bit. I mean, that was so interesting to me, the conflict there. You have this tiny Sunni monarchy that's basically ruling the Shiite majority. And then you have Saudi Arabia backing the monarchy and Iran backing it. Basically, I mean, to some degree, it's in open sources. They think Iran is backing the insurrection. And so it was kind of this interesting proxy war, almost like Vietnam, like a new Cold War in the Gulf. So, I thought that was pretty interesting. And I guess that did, I'd always wanted to be a writer. I didn't really have a good story to tell. And then I was a spy, and then years after leaving the agency, a lot of my experiences kind of stayed with me. And then I was in Bahrain for my husband's job. He works for DOD as a civilian. And that was when it sort of started dawning on me, kind of all my experiences at the agency were coalescing, as a lot of the operations I'd worked on, and just kind of simmering in my mind, I think. They kind of haunted me. And then the Arab Spring just seemed like the perfect prism for a spy novel, just because it's a conflict where there's no clear right side, which I think, because you have Saudi and Iran, and neither is really a perfect partner. It's hard for the U.S. is sort of sandwiched in the middle. We have our Fifth Fleet there, and we're wary of Iran, but Saudi Arabia to some degree is our ally, but not fully.
Yeah.
So it's really a tricky calculus, and I felt like this is espionage. That tricky calculus where there's no clear right side and there's no clear right and wrong.
That's truly an intriguing subject matter, especially because, I think a lot of Americans just maybe watched a little bit of this on TV, didn't get a whole lot, really blitzed or knew the nuances of what was going on during the Arab Spring, and so It's
so true. I mean, I think that it's really a phenomenon, an event, and an area that not a lot of Americans know a lot about, and you almost never see novels set during the Arab Spring. So
Yeah, good choice. Definitely good choice. I fully admit I have not read the book yet.
That's okay.
I am getting the book though, but I do recognize that Del has read the book, so I definitely want to get Del's point of view on some of the content, and then I'll jump back in.
Okay. Loved it. Got it the week it came out.
Thank you.
Plowed through it pretty quickly, which apparently my cat wants to be involved in the interview.
Your cat opened your door? That's impressive.
Yeah, well, I just live here and pay the bills. He actually runs things. It's funny that you bring up the Arab Spring and the fact that there's not been a lot written about it, and that's very true, because what has been written is it's factual, it's analysis, and that's great, but at the same time, I could also partner this with David McCloskey's Damascus Station as yet another reflection of what was going on.
Yeah.
That, was such a huge event. I mean, I was still in the agency at that time, and it was, one more thing that was on fire in a world that was on fire.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, it's the general public is kind of has that mindset, well, there's something going on over there. And I think the beauty of something like this, the Peacock and the Sparrow, is it makes it human. It makes it relatable. That you have this incredibly pivotal event in a part of the world that, whether we like it or not, we are always going to be tied to. And it puts a human face on it. And you get to start understanding how deeply complex it is.
Yes.
There's no good guys, there's no bad guys. There's just shades of gray. So I think that's phenomenal. And what I love, and I could just go on a long list of things I love about your writing. The way it's written, it's rich, it's nuanced, it's it's really literature, which is fantastic. One of the things about espionage novels or spy novels, they frequently fall into that slash category of military/espionage fiction, and they're wildly entertaining, and I love them, right?
Yeah.
I love them as a diversion from the reality of what my life was.
Yeah.
I remember being an instructor down at the farm at one point. One of the students were like, "So, are you going to teach us how to shoot people with a silencer?" I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. Okay.
I know.
Get back to writing your reports. But, so I love them and they're fun, but in a way they kind of really miss the depth, the drama of, say, what Graham Greene wrote, what Le Carré wrote. That battle space is all up here and down here.
Yes.
And I mean, you nailed it. You really did.
Thank you.
And your protagonist he's a deeply flawed individual.
Yes, for sure.
And yet I would tend to say, yeah, he's one of the good guys, albeit flawed.
Thank you for saying that, because I mean, he's a total mixed bag, but I like him. And I mean, I know he's not easy to like, but I don't think he's all bad. And I was rooting for him, so.
Not at all. And one, you and I have served with that guy.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I was thinking after a recent interview, I was like, you know what I should have said? I should have said, we all know a Shane Collins, right?
We absolutely do. And Shane Collins is, he's male, he's female, he's every ethnicity you can think of, because, they're flawed individuals. And even the chief of station, whose name I can't recall off the top of my head.
Whitney Alden Mitchell, yeah.
Yeah, well, with a name like that, you definitely know people like that.
Oh, that one, he's based on a real person.
I suspected as much. That's the funny thing is, like, when you have like this awesome protagonist or, someone who's an absolute awesome person, then you can say, yes, I framed this character after this awesome person. Everyone else, you're like, meh, maybe. It's a tapestry.
Right.
But no, it's just so richly and well done, and you pull in not just the grander what is going on in the world at that time, put a human face on it. You pull in things from the culture and the history of Bahrain, and it's so well done.
Thank you.
And then there's a point, as you're getting towards the end, that the action leaves Bahrain and goes to another place. I want to say it was in Asia.
Cambodia.
And I have to wonder, like, there was the one character who was kind of the swarmy Asian businessman that.
Yes, Uncle Chang. Yes.
Yeah, Uncle Chang, who really reminded me of another very swarmy businessman from that neck of the world.
You mean in real life? Are you talking about
yes.
real life? Well, that's exactly what I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to have any spoilers here, but basically the whole thing with Uncle Chang, as readers will see, was based on a real world scandal. So
yes.
Yes. But to your point about realistic kind of psychological tradecraft, that was really my purpose. I think it's so easy to write a book, really high-tech gadgets and devices that kind of propel the plot. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think a lot of times it can be a crutch, because it's like, oh, you have a device that knows where everyone is at all times, or you can read someone's mind or whatever. And the reality is that A, that's not realistic. We're not that high tech. B, really, I mean, to me, the essence of tradecraft is psychological. It's about outsmarting your opponent. It's about manipulating and figuring out what makes someone tick or who's telling the truth. So so that was what I set out to do, to your point, Del.
No, absolutely. And, it's an excellent point because, as I was saying earlier, I love the military / fiction genre. It's fun. It's enjoyable. But there's something incredibly special about somebody who is a former practitioner who's writing an authentic story. And you're right. There are, very limited gadgets. I mean, writing one.
I have a few. Sorry, say again?
For the public, the amount of butt pain you have to go through to get a gadget is staggering. And more often than not, this is the most effective weapon that you will ever employ in your profession.
So I had some this has been cleared by the agency. I had some nonfiction pieces cleared over the years, but one of the pieces I talk about in Baghdad, this operation where we wanted to work with the military to put a wire on a detainee in one of their detention facilities. And so the military came to us and they were like, "Oh, can you get a wire?" So I go to our tech guy at Baghdad Station, and we meet with the military, and he brings this, like, I won't get into details, but this basically massive device that would be like sticking out of it'd be quite obvious.
Right.
And the military was like, "Really? Is this like, we have something smaller than this?" So, really? But I'm saying, like, people have these illusions that the agency is just, has all this gadgetry and wizardry, and that's really not true.
I think it comes from the amount of standardized television that people are consuming on TV, like your NCISs and things where they have like digital zoom in and clear up images.
Yeah.
You just never can do that. That technology is just not really, I don't believe. But at the same time, I think we're getting these false impressions of what the whole spy network actually looks like from that point of view. So it is refreshing to have stories written from people who have been in those experiences like yourself, creating that kind of content, getting readers, to understand that. This is the kind of thing that I hope gets optioned for a movie,
Oh, thank you.
To really, honestly, like to get that realness out there, and hopefully Hollywood doesn't want to just like throw Tom Cruise in here.
Yeah.
So, but
I would not.
I think that's great.
I would not turn down Tom Cruise, just for the record.
No, obviously no. No, you're going to the moon with him for sure.
If you're watching, Tom.
Mr. Cruise.
He's on strike, I guess, right? He's on strike, I think.
Absolutely.
That brings me to another thing. And I write as well. I do like science fiction, things like that. And I know Del, we write as well. So one of the things I always want to know, as far as like somebody, especially someone that's been published, is were you classically trained? Is there something about writing that just like, is it just natural to you? Some people that might be trying to write a book right now are probably like maybe struggling, trying to figure out a way to get through a wall, that kind of stuff,
I am so not classically trained. I'm like the least classically trained. I never took a class on creative writing. I was a poli-sci and econ major. Sometimes people throw out literary terms to me, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So you can absolutely get published if you don't have that background. And I did always love to write, and I think it did come naturally to me. And I had a lot of really encouraging teachers along the way who would say, you're a very talented writer. You should consider writing. But what I think helps is practice. Like, I've just written a lot on my own over the years, that I never published, just for fun. And I used to keep like voluminous travel journals when I traveled, which I think also helped me to absorb like my surroundings. Like I was able, when I wrote about Cambodia and the Peacock and the Sparrow, it had been 10 years since I'd been there, but I remembered a lot of it just because I think that's my MO, is to go to places and absorb it. And I used to write about it. So I do think it helps to write a lot, like anything, just practicing. And I think reading as well. I mean, I was always a voracious reader. I was not an English major, but I think I probably read as much or more than as much as or more than an English major did. So I think that's the single best thing someone can do, more than a creative writing class, is, although I'm sure those are helpful too, but just reading and figuring out like what speaks to you and what doesn't, and eventually kind of finding your own voice.
Yeah, and that does help with creating and finding that voice, is like just being consistent with writing, things like that. Yeah, it's interesting. I tend to listen to books more than I read books these days, especially just my attention's
I do.
So what's interesting is I'm working on an audio adventure series. So just turning it into a script. And Dell and I have all, we've talked about this in the past. It's like the difference between writing a script and writing a novel.
Yeah.
What's fun? What's more challenging? And so it's interesting to hear that point of view from you, from like I'm not classically trained or anything like that. I haven't really done, any creative writing classes necessarily in school and things like that. But it's always intriguing. It's definitely always intriguing. And I know, Dell, you got a point of view from that too.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Ilana probably shares this, is when you are constantly reading, you're constantly digesting information.
Yeah.
The tragedy is, though, it's stuff related to work. So, ask me how a gas centrifuge actually works and the history of Kenyan politics, all of which is, incredibly tedious. You don't have time to read, espionage fiction. I mean, you'll read 1 or 2 a year when you have time, but then you get out and you're like, if this is what I want to do, if this is my passion, I've got to start familiarizing myself with all these different authors. So you're constantly reading. Like I just finished Daniel Silva's The Collector over the weekend, and then I jumped immediately into Fields of Fire. Lethal Range by Ryan Steck. When that's I'm also reading Landslide by Adam Sykes, and our friend Taylor Moore has got Ricochet coming out at the end of the month. So sometimes you listen, sometimes you read.
Yeah.
But it's awesome because you were saying that you were not classically trained.
No.
Neither was I.
Yeah.
And I'll start writing, and I start falling back onto certain things that I still need to work on in my writing, and I'll stop and I'll read something by somebody who's already published, and the first thing that comes to your head is like, I can't write, I'm a hack.
Hey, I have that feeling all the time. So you're not the
Yeah, the imposter syndrome kicks in real quick then.
I think every writer feels like that. It feels like that.
Yeah. And everyone tells me that. They're like, yeah, stop beating yourself up. Get on it.
Everyone does. I mean, there are times like when I was writing my book, when I was like, I hate this. I'm just going to trash it. It's not going to happen. I mean, I think everyone feels like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The thing I would say too, though, about reading, as good, as helping you to write, I also never just read spy novels. I think like read all kinds of books, I mean, and I drew as much inspiration from spy novelists as from other kinds, classic fiction, for example. I mean, some of my greatest inspirations, I loved like Lolita by Nabokov and
nice.
And American Tragedy by Theodore Dreiser, like really classic books, both of which have really flawed characters and kind of tragic themes to them. So I think, for aspiring writers out there, like read anything and everything,
Yeah, so true. And the classics are huge.
I have a, Del, you might remember this in my book. There's a scene where I'm trying to think, I don't want to give stuff away, but the protagonist goes to this warehouse and he's trying to figure out what crates he's looking for, what like cargo, like he's looking for markings on these cargo containers, and he figures it out. well, I won't give it away, but what inspired me was that scene was inspired by the Purloined Letter by Edgar Allan Poe, where there's there's like a scene where in that story where the clue is spread out across the map in plain sight, but you don't notice it because it's so obvious. It's just spread out in plain sight. There's a great quote that Edgar Allan Poe has in the story. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but that was the inspiration. But to my point about how like all these classic, authors that I loved kind of crept into my story.
No, that's cool. Fantastic. Because really you do have to read like the classics to keep yourself that broader foundation. And I don't want to talk. This interview is about you.
I love this. No, I totally want to hear what you guys are saying. This is like my favorite kind of interview. I love hearing.
No, that's cool. But what I was going to say was I'm kind of shifting with my current project to doing kind of a psychological suspense thriller, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I was like, when my editor was like, well, let's go in this route because this is how the market's changing and such.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And he's like, all right. So he gave me a list of books to read, right?
Okay.
We started with Harlan Coben and Fool Me, I think it was Fool Me Once, and then Trust Nothing or Trust No One, and then Jeff Abbott's Blame. And that was critical for me to understand that, like with a traditional espionage novel, you have this inciting event, you have this path to the culminating event, but along that path, you have the perspectives of both the protagonist and the antagonist along the way. Mm-hmm. Whereas, like a psychological suspense thriller, you have you have these two events, but along the way, it's all the protagonists.
Oh, see, I didn't know any of this. This is all very, again, I don't have the training, so that's very interesting to me.
Well, and there could be like someone with an actual degree in literature who's just heard me say that and say this guy does not know what he's talking about. but with those conversations with my editor and forcing me to read this stuff, I'm like, oh, okay, yes, I can do that.
Yeah,
that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, just speaks to how important it is to read. Like I think naturally kind of absorb, tones and, devices that you feel like work, and I think they kind of come out naturally when you start writing all those things you've read.
Yeah,
that's absolutely really cool. And the other funny thing is, because I'm in a couple of writing groups.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll have these conversations like they'll lament you can't use the word said, right? He said, she said.
Oh, I use the word said.
Yeah, because here's the thing. It's like, I know I can think of one author who I love his work. And you'll open a page and you'll see said like 27 times.
Yeah, right? There's a whole school of thought that thinks you should only use said. I mean, I've heard people say this, that like they think if you say reply or retort or, like asked or that's superfluous. But go on.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's like, then you have authors who don't use he said, she said, or whatever. They just have a line of text.
Yeah.
And you kind of infer that based off of this individual said this here, and it's a back and forth.
Yes.
And ultimately, you just got to figure out what works for you as an artist.
Yeah.
Mick Herron's like that, by the way. I don't know if you've read Mick Herron, but he has like long lines of dialogue without attribution. So you kind of have to just follow along. But yeah, I totally agree with you. And, it's funny because, Del, as you know, my book is really descriptive. And some people don't like that. Some people love it. And other people, some readers have said, oh, there are too many words. And, I mean, literally, they said that. So, but you're never going to please everyone. I think you just have to find your own voice. Like for me, I can't just write a scene without describing it. That's just not who I am as a writer. And some people write very bare bones, books, and that's their style, and that works for them. I mean, I've read books like that I love. Like, I don't know if you guys read Northern Spy by Flynn Berry. which is, it's a beautiful and elegant book. I mean, it takes place in Northern Ireland, and it's terrific, and it's very spare. It's very, it's bare bones, the writing. And I think it works for that novel, so.
That's cool.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, you have to find what works for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, one of the great things I think about the Peacock and the Sparrow is it really, because you're going at that human angle of actually experiencing it, that just makes it more rich. You can almost, and I can, I remember expat communities that are exactly like that. And they have different flavors depending on where you are. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, yeah, that's totally, a small island in the Middle East kind of vibe. I totally get it.
Yeah. I mean, I know. I felt like, that was kind of a big theme of the book was elitism and the privilege of the expat community and the contrast with the poverty of Bahrain and the slums and the revolutionaries. And I think contrasts are so much at the heart of the Arab Spring. And it was interesting to me how the expat community just sort of naturally began to resemble the ruling class there. And I think you see it throughout history. You see it in Vietnam, and they all have their watering holes, like the Majestic in Vietnam, and then the Elphinstone Club in British colonial India. And I think it is maybe a larger theme of the West comes into these places and they just think, we can do what we want, and we have our own little elite privileged bubble. So, and fun fact about the expat theme in my book, a lot of the dialogue was taken from actual conversations that I was part of when I was over there.
I totally believe it, because I've heard conversations like that.
Yeah. And there's a scene, Dale, you might remember, there's a controversy in my book over a nativity scene on the naval base. True story, that really happened. They had this nativity scene, and people were up in arms, and then there was a counter response, but it was like amid this war that's going on, the Arab Spring. Like, this was what the expats were focused on. It was like, should we have the camel and the Christmas tree on the naval base?
Oh yeah, no, I totally believe it. So could you? So as your journey to becoming an author, what can you share in terms of who are the writers that inspired you? Did you have any mentors? For our viewers, could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, my huge inspiration is Graham Greene, The Quiet American. I think it's just the greatest book ever written, like on a plane above all others. I love C.J. Koch, who wrote The Year of Living Dangerously, which they made into a movie with Mel Gibson. But the book is a masterpiece. The book is terrific. And it's kind of a spy novel, kind of not. I like really dark, weighty books that really have something to say. I think I mentioned, An American Tragedy, Lolita. I read a lot of classics growing up. I loved Ian McEwan, The Innocent. In terms of mentors, I'm trying to think. I mean, I definitely had some English teachers along the way who encouraged me, and that made a difference because, like I said, I never really went that path formally, and the creative writing path, and I don't know that I would have had the confidence in writing had it not been for those teachers. And I think actually post-publication, I mean, my mentors, honestly, there have been so many former agency folks, some of whom have written books, who have come out of the woodwork, and they've just been so crazy supportive, including you, Del. But and they've really been mentors to me because this is all new to me, and the whole publishing world is new to me, and that's been really helpful.
That's I'm glad you brought that up. Though a couple of things is the community itself it's not what you would think. You would think that this is going to be a highly competitive, and it's not. because like most authors are like, all of our books can get sold,
right?
And that's not going to happen. But it all could happen. I mean, there's a business component, but they're all like, hey, if this person loves Ilana's book, they're going to love David McCluskey's
book. For sure.
And so that's one component. So they're all awesome, and they'll just take time to talk to you. And then you've got like I think Jim Lawler, right?
I know, Mad Dog. Yes.
Mad Dog is amazing. I love that guy.
Ditto.
I mean, he'll take time to talk to you, answer emails. We met and had coffee one time down in Nova. Just an amazing guy. I mean, they all are. It's
100%. 100%. I mean, I was blown away, to be honest. I mean, just Jim Lawler, others. He was one of the first to reach out to me, and he's been a wonderful mentor and helped me kind of navigate the whole process. And I mean, it's funny because I've never been in a profession where people are this supportive. I've literally never been in. I mean, the agency was not particularly like that.
Yeah.
And I did work as an intel analyst for Department of Defense, and that was actually a wonderful experience. That was like, I really loved the military culture, and I think there was a lot of camaraderie there. So maybe that was the exception, but the agency was fairly competitive, I think. And, I practiced law for a while, and I would not call the legal profession a particularly super supportive profession either. But I mean, I'm just blown away by, it's wonderful. It feels so good. And I think it's so hard to make it as a writer. I mean, even for successful writers, even if you're published, it's so hard that I think we all get it,
Oh, absolutely. And that would be awesome. Something for you to kind of share with readers. There is a path, and there's a couple of gatekeepers that you need to get past. You need to get a literary agent.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
You got to get a publisher. The experience is going to be different for everyone for a variety of different reasons. I would say, because you're past those two gatekeepers. I'm still trying to figure my way past the first one. I would say that it was easier to get into the CIA and or a special mission unit in the military than it was to get. It's literally like trying to put a camel through the head of a needle.
I agree with that. And I just heard a statistic. I don't know if you know this writer, Jeff Higgins.
Yep. I know Jeff.
He's in your, I think he's in one of your writing
groups.
Yes, he is. Or you told me that, maybe. Okay.
He's good.
He's a great guy. And he just hosted this event, and he threw out these statistics, and I don't remember the numbers, but they were crazy. It was like, you have like a 1 in, 400 chance or something of getting an agent. And then even after you get an agent, it's like a 1 in whatever chance of actually getting published. So it was discouraging. I didn't know those numbers before I started my journey.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
That's one of those things where it's like, don't tell me the odds. Just don't tell me the odds.
I know, right? But I will say, so the two authors at this event that I was with on this panel, so they were both published by a small publishing company. And there are small publishing companies where you don't need an agent. And sometimes, maybe that's not someone's goal, but at least if nothing else, it can be a stepping stone. If you do well, it can be a springboard to a bigger publisher.
Would you recommend writing contests, anything like that?
I didn't do any of those. I mean, if you have it in you, sure. I don't know that I had it in me, but I mean, I literally just cold called my old spy days, just cold called agents. I mean, and I didn't kind of realize how audacious that was at the time, because I didn't know any better. But I literally just sent out emails to different people. But what I found was so the publishing industry is so subjective. I mean, I would send queries to, I would pick, say, an agency. I would send queries first to the bottom of the totem pole, the most junior agent there. And they would blow me off, and they wouldn't give me the time of day. And then I would say screw it, I'm going to send it to like the top guy who represents like these big authors or whoever. And then they would be interested. And yeah, and I got a couple offers of representation, and they were from pretty big agents. And yet the more junior ones were not at all interested. So I think, yeah. So I only say that like to say that it's totally subjective, and I think people should aim high, and I don't be discouraged because again, it's just arbitrary. Same with finding a publishing deal. I mean, there were smaller publishers that were not interested, and yet, you know, in the end, I got Simon & Schuster, Atria. So again, it's just, yeah. And I always tell people too that, you know, writing is a life of rejection, even for the most successful authors, right? I mean, like the most successful authors, there is not a single author I know who doesn't have a million rejection stories. Yeah. I certainly do. And you'll get like 20 or 50 rejections for every one yes, but one yes is all you need, you know? So
yeah, you got to have that rhino skin. You got to have that tunnel vision. Yeah. You got to also have the armor to take those no's, you know? Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it only gets worse because, you know, you get published, and then you get, you know, readers who don't like you, or, you know, you're not going to be reviewed in this newspaper or whatever. I mean, it's just a constant. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a definite thing. And you know, honestly, there's something to our personalities as writers to that we're just driven. I think it's part of who we are. It's our personalities in general. Like, but you know, the no's are just like, you know, these are our literary creations, things that we're putting out into the world to like kind of like be a part of that echelon of like great books that are out there floating around that may still exist after we're gone, you know. And it is tough. It's not easy to get through it, but I think that's part of it. That's the challenge, and the challenge is what I think we strive to you know, overcome, you know.
Yeah, and I think that I almost take it as like a badge of honor at this point that like not everybody is going to like my book. I mean, I mean that really, because I feel like, you know, you kind of realize more and more throughout the process with agents, and then with publishers, and then with reviewers, you realize some people love your book and some people don't. And I almost take that as a compliment, because it means I've written something distinctive, you know, something that resonates with some people, but maybe it's not someone else's taste, and that's fine. I mean, I feel like anyone can write a bland sort of formulaic book that appeals to a wide variety of people. And I think, you know, I think, you know, find your voice and take pride in your voice, you know, and not everyone's going to like it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, some people will like it. You'll find your readers, and that's what's important.
Yeah. I wish I had thought ahead that I could have forwarded it to my work account. I could pull it up right now, but it's this image, it's a meme, and it shows like what is effectively a pizza, right? So a third of it is a pizza that's got like everything on it. And then another third of it is like a cookie pizza with all kinds of candies and whatnot on it. And the other third has a Cornish game hen and mashed potatoes and bacon shoved on it. And the guy said, and basically the meme says, "This is what you get when you take all feedback seriously."
Yes. Yes. That's so true. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't, I mean, and feedback is great. You know, it's awesome. It's from the heart most of the time, but you can't incorporate it into everything because, you know, you are creating art, you know, that's the bottom line.
Absolutely. And that's another good point. I mean, so along the way, you'll get feedback, you know. I mean, I submitted to a couple friends to read, and then my agent had some suggestions, and then my editor. And what I found was that sometimes they all said totally different things and contradictory things, and those things I would ignore. And then they would say some common things, like the things that I found were kind of common denominators. Those were the things I changed.
Yeah.
So you kind of learn, you know, what to. I mean, you kind of become more and more comfortable with your voice. Like, okay, that's a good suggestion that makes my work better. And the rest of it, you're like, no, that's really not what I'm going for here.
Yeah. That's interesting because I get so I've written things, I've had friends read it, I've had professionals look at it, and one of the things that some people may say is oh, this is a run-on sentence, this is a long run-on sentence.
Oh, I love sentences.
Honestly, like one of my favorite writers is Neil Gaiman, and he has extremely long run-on sentences of descriptions, and it's almost poetic in the way that he describes things. And maybe some of that is what I'm kind of like musing from. And when I lay out these sentences, it's like I'm just putting this level of description into the content. And but other people are like, oh, there's a run-on, you want to put a period here, you want to put a period here. I'm like, wait, no, maybe that's not my voice, maybe that's your voice,
right?
Maybe that's something else. So when it comes to that editing, especially when you send it out to people, to both of your points, you at some point you have to just be like, wait, this is who I am, this is how I write.
Absolutely.
Let's work from that point of view.
Absolutely. I mean, and yes, by the way, some of my favorite writers write like page-long sentences, like Philip Roth or William Faulkner. So I'm all about the run-on. I'm all about the run-on sentence.
And because it is art, there is also a component of you as an artist can choose to just ignore these man-made laws anyway. Like, one of the things that pops into my head every time I read a Daniel Silva novel is, how many times can Gabriel Allon steal or forge a masterpiece as part of a plot to mess with the Russians? And it does every time, but it's like you still love it. And he does certain things when he's writing where he will repeat phrases over and over. And anyone else tries that, it's like, no, it ain't gonna work. But it's like it's gorgeous, it's rich, it's nuanced, and I will read everything he writes to include his grocery list. Of course, me being a spy, that would be normal for me to steal your grocery list and read it. But no, I mean it's part of being an artist is ignoring these man-made rules and creating something else.
It's almost like, I liken it almost to like, you have an artist who can create this extremely realistic, precise painting, and then, maybe an impressionist comes in and muddies it up, and it's like someone saying, no, that's not, you're not playing by the rules, the tree is too blurry, and you're like, but the artist knows how to paint, that's their style. They can paint a tree exactly that looks exactly like the real tree, but that's their artistic interpretation of it.
No, absolutely.
In that way, sometimes I think you can get trapped in that what's the word I'm looking for? The imposter syndrome that we mentioned earlier. Because people are telling you things and making you feel like you're doing something wrong versus, oh wow, I'm celebrating your artistic impression here versus that. So that is helpful. I'm very happy to have talked to you today, especially because like I'm actively writing just as Dale is on projects, and it's great to hear from somebody that's got a book out there, you're making it work, like that. One last thing, because we're coming up to the top of the hour, I definitely wanted to ask you before we left is this the first book? Is this story itself, are you going to carry this character further into other storylines, into other books, or are you thinking this is a one-off, I have other things in the back that I'm going to bring out?
Yeah, I mean, I never envisioned this as part of a series, and I don't think I will. I think it's a standalone book. I think I don't know, Del, if you have an opinion on that, but to me, it's it's almost about the figurative death of a spy, in the sense that it's like this aging spy trying to make something of his life and career, and to what degree he succeeds. And I kind of feel like it ends there,
Yeah, I mean, if you were really hell-bent to make Shane appear in another, there's probably a couple different ways that you could do it, either by going back in time or, Of course, that old chestnut of you're the only one who has ever been a agency who's qualified for this special mission. I know you retired, but we need you back.
Right.
I'm too old for this shit. Yeah.
But, like Clint Eastwood in Firefox, but no. But it's beautiful. You've got so much to offer. I can't wait to see the next one. Are you working on one? Are you working on one now?
So I am. I mean, I feel like I do feel like spy novels are a good lane for me, and I have started working on another one. This time it has a female protagonist, and it's kind of based on my own experiences in Baghdad and a couple of the operations I did, but fictionalized. So I have made very little progress.
No. It's one of those things that it's like everybody's going to be different. You got to figure out how to do it. You'll get there. I have decided because I am. You see your own little image on these Teams meetings. I'm looking behind me and I'm like, you know what? We've been interviewing like all of my author friends, right?
That's awesome.
We started with Tyler. You're number 2. Dave McCloskey, Jack Stewart next. I'm going to try and convince Connor Sullivan to come on, but he just moved. He's got a baby on the way.
I know.
He's probably tucked himself away up in the mountains of Montana. It's like, I'm not going anywhere.
I know. I texted him the other day and I didn't hear from him for like 24 hours. And he was like, sorry, I don't have my phone with me when I write. And I was like, oh, you're so dedicated. Wow. Like this makes me feel inadequate as a writer. I'm on my phone all the time.
I think is up. I think Dave is up next, but if we're going to interview authors of anything in the espionage space, we'll close off with this question.
Yes.
What is your favorite Bond and why?
Oh my God. This is like the worst question because I barely watch Bond movies, but oh my God, I don't even know. Let me think. So like, I don't know, Roger Moore, maybe? Is that a bad answer?
No. That's fair. I mean, I think he was mine because, he was mine when I was younger.
Same.
Because that's like, you'd see the James Bond movies. They'd be on commercial television. And that's how you became familiar with it. I think for me, it's probably Daniel Craig, just because he was Bond during the period that I was in the agency.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. But
I mean, I feel like my favorite
question
has yet to come. That's what I'll say. They were talking about Idris Elba. I wanted him to be the new Bond, and then they kind of shelved that.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate factor that Idris Elba himself turned that down because of all the heat that he got online from Bond fans.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, they were like, we don't want him to be black, that thing, so which is kind of unfortunate because I feel like we've established, especially during the Daniel Craig years, that Bond is a title. It's not a person, so he could be Asian if they want to make him Asian. 100%. Yeah, but they want to keep that. They want to keep that that British guy theme going.
I will be the first to admit that when Daniel Craig was selected, I was like, he's blonde. James Bond can't be blonde. You know what? I got over it. I got over it.
Yeah,
humanity, you can get over, Idris Elba being.
I know. Honestly, my opinion, though, I think what they need to do, since he got so much heat for just not even asking to be Bond, but just being just the fact that they had put him up into consideration for the role. I would love to see Idris Elba in a Bond-like character role doing something, because I think he's a great actor. I think he definitely could pull that off. He's got the energy for it, to look for it, But I'd be a fan of that. But I'm Roger Moore too. That was the guy I grew up with. That's who I knew coming up, was like James Bond. I was like, that's my guy.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
all right, good. I got the right answer.
I think that wraps it. Hey, Ilana, it's so good to see you. And the next time you and your husband are up in the area, please let me know.
I will. Thank you so much for having me, you guys. This was so much fun.
Absolutely. And to the audience, Ilana Berry, we're going to put your link in the description for the Peacock and the Sparrow. I love that.
Buy this book.
And the Sparrow. Buy this book. We're going to put the link to it in our description. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to Shots from Winchester so you can get great content like this. Make sure you leave some comments too so you can get some feedback. So we'll learn how much you enjoy this type of content. And maybe, I don't know, one of you guys might get on there and write a comment and, answer some of the questions that maybe somebody has on there about your journey, especially. So thanks again for you guys being on the show, and we'll see you again. Hopefully your next book, you'll come back on the show again.
I love that.
We can talk about that again. Yeah, this is a great conversation, guys.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks a lot, y'all.
Bye.
Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Bye.